and Crystal here while we get you guys into this fun little hour where we dive into the basics and the foundations of M. Really appreciate you guys all being here. I was watching the polls as they went by, and I understand that I may have missed the mark on some of my poll questions here as far as kind of where our workforce lies as far as the industry and the experience. It seems like there was a pretty good margin there that was in the other category, and I assume that's because there wasn't really an analyst role there listed. So it's very possible that a lot of you guys are probably in that world of being a DBA or an analyst of any kind. So apologies if I missed the mark there on my questions. I did write these. It's not Crystal's fault. That's on me. So if you guys didn't see something that you aligned with, then I understand, no worries. But of course, if there is anything particular that you guys want to share, you guys want to ask about, feel free to do so in the chat. We'll be keeping an eye on that as much as we can while I'm going through this course. And like I said, we're just going to be talking about the foundations of M here. So let me go ahead and get my my slides going here for you guys. All right, so let's just go ahead and get started. So again, my name is Daniel Stratiff, if you guys didn't already know, and you can absolutely reach me at dstratiff@pragmaticworks.com. I am a training content manager and consultant here at Pragmatic Works, and what we'll be going over today is really just the foundations of the M language that's used here in Power BI. Okay, so a little bit about me. We're going to run through this really quick. I am a training content manager and consultant here for Pragmatic Works. Like I said, I like to use this little slide because, well, if you'd seen me in person, I am a pretty, or if you saw my headshot, I'm a pretty hairy guy. I've got a beard, mustache, and all that. And I guess some people it intimidates, but I am absolutely a pretty silly, soft guy on the inside. So that's me there in an image. Before this opportunity presented itself with Pragmatic Works, I was a broadcast director, operator, technician, and engineer for professional sports. I worked at the PGA, USTA, ITF, NHL, and NBA, as well as a whole bunch of other organizations. And I did a lot of data work there. We actually ran all of their scoring data. We developed their scoring processes and programs, and we handled all the data there along with IBM. So that was a pretty cool experience. I also directed and operated and ran and managed a lot of the camera operations and multicam operations, especially live streaming and internet interfacing there. So that was a really interesting opportunity. Long before that, I was a U.S. Air Force weapons technician for F-22 Raptor stealth fighters and MQ-9 Reaper drones. So I worked on jets and I worked on drones. I was not a pilot. A lot of people, as soon as you tell them you're in the Air Force, they say, "Oh, what did you fly?" Don't ask that because I can tell you right now, only 2% of the Air Force are pilots. So it's a very, very small margin. There's actually more pilots in the Navy, and of course, this is in the United States. As far as other countries, I can't really say, but there's actually more pilots and more planes in the Navy. So just so you know, if you meet someone in the Air Force, there's a good chance that if they are a pilot, they'll let you know. In my personal life, I enjoy some photography, some videography. I edit and I do graphic design, things like that. I'm a creative individual, so I enjoy that kind of stuff as well. If you guys do want to get in touch with me, you can absolutely tweet me on Twitter at superpowerbi. You can find my blog at superpowermybi.com. It's a little sparse currently. We've been going through a lot of development and branding. So that's going to change here shortly. I'm going to be posting all kinds of stuff there to share with you guys and share a little bit of extra interesting, cool stuff for you guys to check out. You can also email me, like I said before, at dstratiff@pragmaticworks.com. So if you guys want to find me, again, my blog is there as well as my Twitter handle. And of course, you can email me as well. You can also find me on LinkedIn at my first and last name. I believe I am the only one there with that first and last name. And you can absolutely find me there. Okay, so again, I am your instructor here for this brief course, and you can email me there. Okay, so M. We're talking about M, and really the whole reason that we want to do that I wanted to do this hour-long little jaunt with you guys is to to kind of break down the barriers of M, to break down the barriers of using this transformation language and this cleansing language, because I feel like a lot of people are really scared of it. I feel like many people, they see M when they open the advanced editor or when they look at the formula bar, when they're in that Power Query editor, and they get a little put off because it's different than DAX, and a lot of people, I feel, analysts that are going from Excel or something like that into Power BI, they see a lot of DAX and like, oh, this is pretty comfortable once you get used to it, at least. M is really the same way, and it's different, but it is still actually pretty easy to read and understand. So I want you guys to feel confident and comfortable coming into this. Now I will say that this course is really for kind of an intermediate Power BI user. But if you're looking for kind of expert M tips, you're really not gonna find a whole lot here. We're really just gonna talk about that original foundation, the basics of it, understanding it, reading it, using the shared function, some of the functions you can use, and some of the ways that you can use M to take advantage of Power BI's query editor and to transform and cleanse your data. Get some more functionality out of it than just the basic UI. So that's exactly it. Is when we're talking about M, what is it? Why do we use it? And how do we understand that syntax, right? So let's go ahead and jump into that. Now, using M query formulas, the cool thing is, yes, we have the Power Query editor, right? And the Power Query editor writes that M in the background for us. And M is for mashup. It's Microsoft used the letter M just basically to reference mashup. It is a mashup language of sorts, somewhat similar to T-SQL, somewhat similar to some other languages out there that you might see. And M is easily made dynamic. It's very easy to kind of grab little sections of it and move it elsewhere and almost copy and paste it and use it however you'd like. So it is very, very flexible, as long as, of course, you're keeping your syntax correct. Now, why do we use M query? Well, it's for our data transformations. Our data transformations are cleansing, when we're pivoting and unpivoting, when we're removing unwanted characters, we're splitting columns. And again, that query editor, the Power Query editor, is just a UI that generates M. So as we're clicking those buttons, it's just writing M in the background for us. Now, of course, if you are using the Query Editor add-on for Excel, this will apply as well. It's all very, very similar. Of course, Power BI and the Power BI Power Query Editor, I should say, and the Query Editor add-on for Excel, there's quite a bit of overlap, but it's not exact. There's going to be some differences as far as the UI and things like that go. But as far as the M language is considered, you're going to be looking at essentially the same thing here. So the only thing is, M, unfortunately, is really nothing like Excel formulas or VBA, but M is still functional and dynamic. It has minimal syntax. It's very easy to read and understand. However, writing M is probably not something that end users are going to do. It's going to be reserved for more advanced users like data analysts and especially data wranglers, which these days, I mean, if you are an analyst, there's a good chance you're a wrangler as well. It seems to be kind of how things work. Okay, so let's talk about our fundamentals here. Where do we write M? Well, again, it's in that Power Query editor, and it's going to be in the formula bar, or it's going to be in the advanced editor. And there's really two ways to get to that advanced editor. A couple more as well that are kind of a backdoor, but you can write it in the formula bar if you wish, but we also have the advanced editor. Now, the M query results, you can produce a single value, a list, or otherwise known as an array, a table or a function, and you can copy and paste your M query results into other workbooks and Power BI files. That's not necessarily the best sharing method though, but it is something to consider, that if you wanted to, say, use the similar transformations, similar cleansing tactics on other files and other data sources, then you absolutely could basically just copy your M, paste it into a notepad and save it somewhere and say, oh, here's my transformation script, and then just paste it into a new PBI file. So it's very easy to take advantage of that way. Should be kept in mind that M query is case sensitive. Unlike DAX, where DAX you can basically just kind of type willy-nilly, it's very, very forgiving. This is not. It is case sensitive, much like a lot of other languages. You have to be very careful about your casing and your syntax. And we can use the hashtag or hash shared function to return library functions. This will actually show us all of the things that we can do with M. So that's a brief rundown of what M is and where to write it. But let's take a look at the actual script here for a second. Now, This is a little bit spaced out. This is not quite exactly what you're going to see whenever you go ahead and open up your advanced editor. We've gone ahead and done a little bit of formatting here to make this a little easier to understand. And then we'll do that also whenever we go into an example for you guys and show you kind of how this works. Now, what we have here is our let statement here. And this is our let expression, I guess I should say. And this is really where we're going to be performing all of our transformations and our cleansing. Now, of course, you can see here there are many steps. And as we take a look at that, it will, they each have their name. Now, when we look at our first line here, we can see this is our source, right? It's pretty obvious. And then below that, we have all these hash lines with a title. Now, the only reason that we're using this hash with that quotation mark is because of the fact that we have spaces in the titles of these steps. Now, I could, if I wanted to, actually go in and remove these, and I'll show you guys that you can do this later on. If I really wanted to, I could go ahead and remove that space and get rid of this if I wanted to clean this up. But of course, that would change the way that our applied steps would look in Power BI as well, because we're changing the name of that step. But this is our steps here. And this is exactly what we see whenever we are looking at all the different things that we're doing in M. Every time we add a new step, every time we click a new button in the UI for the Power Query Editor, it's going to add a new step here, and it's going to add something else. Now, that's obviously just the name of that expression or variable. And then next we see the actual M function. So in this case, we're looking at tables. So these are all table functions. We're saying table.promote headers. So we're promoting the headers in this table. And then we're transforming our column types, and then transforming the columns, and then splitting the columns, etc. So again, yeah, at first glance, especially without this all spaced out, you're going to see a whole bunch of different symbols, a whole bunch of different syntax, and it's going to be like, whoa, what is going on here? I don't really understand what's happening. But when we start breaking this down, it becomes very, very simple. Obviously, we're referencing a table here because we have that table there, right? That makes sense. And then we can see basically exactly what the M code is doing to that table. It's promoting the headers, it's transforming the column types. It's pretty self-explanatory, so it makes things very easy for us. There's not a lot of abbreviations or hiding things or anything like that. So it makes things pretty easy for us. So those are the actual M functions that are happening in each step. Now, our next section here is where M is going to reference that previous step. For M to know exactly where to apply what is happening next, because of course, as M code works, really it's writing everything in advance and then applying it all back to that source as it comes in. Because the Power Query Editor is basically just a preview of our data. Now, all of this, all the transformations that are happening in M are happening before the data is actually imported into the model. So we're basically giving a script and we're writing out the steps, basically like a blueprint or instructions to Power BI to say, all right, go ahead and do these things for me, and then we will query that data. So that's exactly why it's called the Power Query Editor, right? So we're editing the query that we want to perform, that we want to execute, and we need to reference these steps so that it knows where to apply these different transformations. So as you can see here, if we take a look at the promoted headers right here, and then we look at the last step, that was promote headers. I can even look back at the actual name and it says promoted headers right there. Now again, change type here, change type here. So each one of these lines is going to reference the last step before it actually goes ahead and performs that current step. Now anything beyond that is essentially the actual expression of that step, and whether that is the referencing of those columns or the table or a value or anything like that, that is what we're seeing here. So in this case, what we're looking at is this changed the type of the order date here. So the order date column, it changed it to a date.year. Now we can't see the whole script here, but we'll take a look at some here in a second. But it's very easy to see here that we have our change type order date, and we can see all this information. Very, very easily, we can really read exactly what's happening. Now, once you have applied all the steps that you wanted, to actually return your expression, you're going to provide your in expression, which is really just your output. So you'll notice that after the in, you have the final step that you performed referenced here. Now, what we're saying is, all right, Power Query Editor, I want you to go ahead and perform this step, grouped rows. And it's going to say, okay, I'm going to perform grouped rows, which is table.group oh, but I need to perform this step first, where it's referencing that prior step. So it's basically going to go through every single step and perform them all in sequential order as we reference them. So we always need to return our final step here. Now, one of the interesting things is we could actually go ahead and say, rather than returning grouped rows, I just want to return change type. Now, the funny thing about this is, at this point, essentially, M is going to, or the M engine at this point, would kind of skip over these last two steps and only perform our change type 1 and above. So whatever we return here in our in expression will kind of determine exactly how much of this we actually perform. Now, this would only occur if we went in and edited it ourselves and made these changes, and for some reason we want to do that. Maybe we just wanted to test something and see if maybe we broke something or how we could fix something or change something. This is something we could consider. But it's not something you would usually do. However, you will always want to reference your final step to perform everything within that script that you wrote. So those are all the various different parts of our actual M code. So our let expression, our named expressions and variables here, our M functions here as well, our previous step reference there, and our in expression. It's all very simple once you really break it down and take a look at it. So let's do exactly that. Let's actually open up a Power BI file. Let's open up a Power BI report, and we will take a look at some M here. So give me just one moment. I'm going to do this off screen. I'm going to go ahead and open this file up. And it's loading on my other screen here. Just one second, guys. Okay, so we have some basic data here. This is very, very simple, and this is all based on our AdventureWorks data. So this is really some really simple stuff going on. And this is, of course, just our Power BI desktop. If you don't have any experience with Power BI, unfortunately, I'm not really going to be able to give you a whole lot of info on just how to use Power BI, the desktop itself. But we're going to instead go into the Power Query Editor, and we're going to look at M. So again, this is really more so for at least an intermediate user, maybe a beginner user in Power BI, and especially if you're an analyst or data wrangler who wants to learn how to better kind of import and discover your data and clean it up or prepare it. All right, so of course, to get to our query editor, we're going to go ahead and click Edit Queries here at the top. So I'm just going to click that, and this will open our Power Query Editor. Now, if I always like to explain this because sometimes it happens. If you don't actually see anything occurring, once you click that button, you might just see a blank screen, or rather see this. It's very possible that it went ahead and opened the query editor in the background. So go ahead and just make sure that it isn't open in the background and take advantage of that. I'm going to delete this table. Just ignore this for a moment. We don't need this. That was from a prior course. Sorry about that, guys. But we have a couple of different tables here, a couple of different queries here where we went ahead and brought these in a prior Power BI report. We went ahead and brought these things in and did some things that we wanted to do to, prepare this data and clean it up. So I'm going to go to my customer table here, and I have quite a few things applied here. Let me take a look at my internet sales. Yeah, we have basically the same amount of steps on each one of these. So I'm going to look at my internet sales table here, and I can see all my applied steps. Now, again, the Power Query Editor is just a UI that writes M for us in the background, right? So all of these applied steps are just different steps in that M query. Now, if we wanted to take a look at them and see exactly how they're performing and exactly how they're written, we can do exactly that by going to the Advanced Editor. So I want you guys to take note of this, these applied steps here. We have our source, navigation, promoted headers, change type, and renamed columns. These are very simple, but there's a couple other things that we could do here as well. So let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll open our advanced editor. I'm going to get rid of just a couple of these things that we don't necessarily need or want. So I'll just go ahead and bring in, I'm going to use my choose columns here. I'm just only going to bring in some columns, and we'll just pick exactly what we want. I'm going to uncheck select all, and I'm just going to bring in like my, let's say, our or unit price, excuse me, our order quantity. We'll do our, let's say, We'll do our product key as well. We're just going to bring in a couple of basic columns, our sales amount, and we'll bring in these dates here as well. So why not? I'm not bringing in everything, obviously, but we're just going to bring in some things here just to show you guys kind of how this works. All right, so I'm going to bring in these columns. I'm not going to return everything. There was a lot of stuff there, right? So I like this, what I have here. Now, it's possible that I might want to rename this stuff if I really wanted to. I'm fine with kind of how it's named currently. We have our order date the way that we want, our ship date. What if we instead only wanted to see maybe a year here? We could do that. So let's say for ship date, we only wanted to see the year for some reason. We could go ahead and apply a transformation, go to year. We probably wouldn't want to actually do that, right? Because we would want our full date, but I'm just going to apply a couple basic transforms here so you guys can see how these steps are working. All right, so I applied these extra steps on top of the steps we already had. Now let's go ahead and take a look at them in the advanced editor. So to get there, we can go ahead on our home ribbon here in the Power Query Editor. We can click the advanced editor button right here. Or we also, and that is in the query section of the home ribbon. We can also go to view, the view ribbon at the top, and there is advanced editor here as well in the advanced section. So either way, whichever way you like getting there, it's really up to you. I usually just use the home ribbon because we spend a lot of time here anyway. So I'm going to click the advanced editor button, and you'll notice this should open up a separate pane. Now, only recently, maybe 2 months ago, maybe 3, we finally got some IntelliSense for M. And IntelliSense, if you're not aware, is basically like Microsoft's version of autocomplete. So it will actually help us with writing out our script here. So they added it for DAX quite a while ago, and then they just recently added it in for M in our advanced editor. This used to all just be basically text, and you would have to, just know the syntax and understand exactly what to do. But now we have IntelliSense here to make things way easier for us. Now, this is a little bit more what you would usually see when you open your advanced editor. Things are not as well formatted as we saw in the example we had there, but we can always make it look that way if we really want to. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Let's find our furthest out. I'm going to take this one. I'm just going to tab this over, and I'm just going to tab the rest of these over to make this a little easier to read and to really see all these different steps here, exactly like we saw them in that example. So here we go, just tabbing these, our little equal signs over here. Okay. All right, so there we have the name of each one of our steps, right? So we have our let expression. This is, again, just all of our actual expression of what we want to go ahead and return, what we want to bring in, right? And then beneath that, we have our source. And with our source, we have our, that's obviously just bringing in exactly what our data source is. So that's pretty self-explanatory. Below that, we have the fact internet sales sheet, which is, again, part of our data source here. And then we have our promoted headers. So this is the first actual transformation that's being applied. Now, I didn't apply this. Power BI applied this automatically whenever I imported this file. However, we can still see it here in our advanced editor. Of course, we can undo the steps that Power BI applies automatically as well. Now, we also have our change type here, and then renamed columns, removed other columns, and extracted year. And of course, our in expression and the extracted year step reference there below it. Now, we can also space this out if we really wanted to. So we have the name of each of our steps. I'm going to kind of leave our source and our navigation here where they are. Now, this is here. We didn't see this in our example because we only just brought in the really the whole contents of our source. Our source was basically just a single sheet. But in this case, we actually had more than one, so we selected the sheet there. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and just space out our different steps. So I'm going to go ahead and take this forward. We'll take it up to there. That should be fine. And I'll space this out as well. And again, we'll just kind of space these the same way we saw in our example. Oops, let me fix that. There we go. And this last one here as well. There we go. Now, if I really wanted to, I could space this out as well, but as you can see, this isn't quite the same, and we wouldn't really want to adjust these steps too much if we're going to always use our data source the way that we selected it. Now, if we wanted to go ahead and start adding some automation and parameterization, then we could definitely edit this as well and insert some parameters and variables. It's definitely something to consider, but for now, we're just going to take a look at our actual transforms. So we have our different actual M functions here, right? So we have our table.promote headers, just like we saw. Table.transform column types, again, very, very familiar, just like we saw in the example. Table.rename columns, table.select columns, and table.transform columns. Now, these are the steps that were already applied when we went ahead and opened the file. But as soon as we get into the ones I applied, you'll notice there's no difference here. The way that I'm clicking these buttons and the way that Power BI did them automatically, applied these steps automatically, there's no difference in the M code in the background. So it all just kind of runs seamlessly together. So anything Power BI does is basically the same as you doing it. That Power Query Editor is, again, just going to apply these steps themselves. So as we can see, we have our select columns step here that we applied, or that function there. And that's where I went ahead and clicked the choose columns button, and I just chose the columns I wanted to use. And we can see here that it's referencing that renamed columns step. And then it's saying, okay, we chose our product key, order quantity, or unit price, etc. So we see those columns that I chose earlier when I selected those. And there's our sales amount as well, and our order date, due date, and ship date. Now then below that, we had our transform columns here. So we see our table.transform column step. There's our function. And again, we're referencing our removed other columns, because that is our last step, right? Removed other columns. Even though we use select columns, it's technically removed other columns because that's exactly what it named it. It just chooses a name based on the context. So it says removed other columns, and then it's saying, okay, now we're going to transform the ship date column, and we want to pull back, we want to reference only the date.year, so the year of that date value, integer 64 type. So it's an integer type, 64-bit. So we have our removed other columns. We just went ahead and go ahead and bring back the year as an integer, and there we go. That's all of the steps that were applied. So this is very, very simple, and it makes total sense, right? And we can even see, it provides us with a little bit of a guide for any of our string. It makes it red. These are Boolean values, so we see blue for true. This null is basically a data type, so it makes it that kind of teal turquoise color there. If we saw a number or anything like that, then we would see that as well. And then our let and our in are blue as well, and we see our extracted year. Now, I do just want to show you guys really quickly. If I went ahead and, like I said before, referenced a prior step and just went with, say, renamed columns, and I referenced my renamed columns step, this would essentially, when I click done, go ahead and only return the steps that I wanted to apply. So it's running that script, and now we can see that it doesn't really show as the applied steps appropriately here. And that's because I went ahead and actually edited that source. But if I go into my, or rather if I look at my source here, I can see that it basically removed those other steps I applied because we have all of our columns back, right? And if I look at that ship date, you can see, again, I have my year. So by referencing that step, we basically just didn't apply any of those steps. So now if I go back and I say extracted year as my final step, and whoops, I go ahead and return this. And you'll notice as I'm typing, it says no syntax errors have been detected. So it'll be very helpful while you're typing out your M script. It'll say, hey, you know, you have an error here, you have an issue. We're not really seeing this syntax doesn't work. You need to fix this. It'll let you know. So I'm gonna click done here again, and now everything is fixed and we're fine. So we're referencing the last step to actually let that in, and now all is good. We can see all of our steps here, and everything works as we wanted it to. Okay, so that's really the absolute basics of M, showing you guys kind of the steps there, how to get into the advanced editor, where you can actually kind of write your own M script here, and how to work on those different steps, and of course, kind of apply some changes. Now, again, this is really because we just want you guys to not be scared of M. And you'll notice those little, those formatting changes I made here, they're still here. And again, I could go ahead and space this out if I really wanted to. But yes, our little formatting changes, they're saved and everything like that, but just don't be scared of M. Get in here and play with it. And yeah, you might break it. So it's probably good to, if it is something really important, if it is something really a valuable step or something that took a long time to write, then you can go ahead and comment it out and save it, which we can comment out with our 2 forward slashes, and we'll talk about that more in a second. But definitely just get in here and try some things and see exactly how things work for you. Really quick, I do just want to mention, you'll notice if I just put like 1 slash here, it doesn't understand this. It says, hey, this token identifier, I'm expecting that, and that is incorrect. I'm not seeing what I should be seeing here. I'm not seeing your source or anything like that. I'm just seeing this forward slash, which is actually a, it's like a termination. So it doesn't like that. It says, hey, this isn't going to work for me, and it lets us know with that red underline. The same or something similar would occur if I go ahead and say get rid of that equal sign. It's saying, hey, I'm expecting an equal sign here, and you haven't given it to me. I see that there is a function here, but that's you're missing something. So again, it will kind of let us know if there is a problem. So I'm going to go ahead and click done here, and we're pretty much all done with this query. We don't really need to take a look at anything else here. Let's go ahead and jump back into our slides real quick, and I'll talk a little bit more there. All right, so hash shared, or the shared function. Now, the cool thing about the shared function is it's something that's built into Power BI that will allow you to essentially just see an entire complete list of all of the available M functions. Now, like I said before, the Power Query Editor really only allows you, say, half of the true functionality of M within Power BI. There is a whole nother world, basically a whole nother 100% of what you have, albeit a little bit more specific. You may not use all of it. It might be more appropriate only for certain situations or for certain data sources, but no matter what, it is all very useful. So it might not be useful for everybody, but it could very well be useful for you. So I recommend you guys check out this shared function. Now, to view it and take a look at all of these available functions, you're going to want to create a new blank query. Once you make that blank query, you want to go ahead and in that formula bar, just type equals hash shared or hashtag shared, however you want to reference that. And then you should see a, not a table yet, but essentially a record of all of these different functions. Now we can then convert that into a table so we can take a look at this and actually see all of our different functions. So that's us converting into a table there. And then we could actually look at all of the contents. So let's go ahead and do that really quick. It won't take long at all. All right, so we're already here in a query, so we can take advantage of this Power BI file here and go ahead and take a look at our shared function here. So I'm going to click on New Source here at the top, and I'm going to click Blank Query at the bottom. Now we're presented with just this blank function bar, right? There's nothing here, or formula bar, I should say. There's nothing here, so we can go ahead and enter whatever we'd like. I'm just going to hit equals hash shared. And you'll see as soon as I type that out, it turns red to show us, hey, this is a function. You can go ahead and use this. And I'm going to hit enter. And just like that, it's going to go ahead and load up. And I'm going to ignore this. It's going to go ahead and load up with all of these records that have just all of these different functions that we could take advantage of. Now, I could go ahead and scroll through and take a look at these, but I can tell you right now that we get a little better functionality when we convert this into a table. Now, again, this is just returning a record, so we just have a ton of records here. It's not a list, it's records, but we want to turn this into a table. And you'll notice that once we have this shared function pulled up, we see our record tools, and our real only option here is to convert this into a table. So I'm going to go ahead and click this icon up here in the top left to actually do so. And once I do, it'll take just a second, and then it's going to convert this into a table. So now I could actually go ahead and I could select all of my titles. That's of course only going to tell me my title, but if I select the, not the actual yellow text, but if I select the cell that the yellow text is within, I can actually see the contents of these. Now, I of course have all of my queries here that I actually brought in, but beneath that, if I start clicking on the actual functions, again, not on the yellow text, but on the cells, it will give me a bit of a descriptor for exactly what this function does. And the cool thing is that we can actually use the built-in Power Query Editor functions to look a bit deeper into this stuff and to look for something in particular. Now you'll notice a lot of this is based around kind of our data sources here, QuickBooks, Smartsheet, SparkPost, etc. And it kind of makes sense that those are first because, of course, we want to select our data source first, right? But let's say that I was looking for something in particular and I wanted to look at, say, a date function. I could go ahead and use this drop-down arrow under name to filter this and search through my results, just like we can any other time in a query. I could also sort these as well, A to Z or Z to A, and we could use our text filters if we really wanted to. So we could use contains or something like that. We can just use our search bar to do something very similar. So I'm going to use date here, and you'll see that we see all of our date functions. I'm just going to click OK, and this is going to filter down my shared query here into just my date functions. So now I can go ahead and scroll down through this stuff, and I can see all kinds of different options that I could take advantage of. So like date time as well. So if you wanted our date format, or if we wanted our date time. Now, you might notice this date year. We saw that in that example when I went ahead and just extracted our year. We said I want to return date.year, and we used our integer. But you'll see if I click on this here, it says function date time as any, as nullable number, returns the year component of the provided date time value, date time. So example, find the year in hashtag date time 2011 12/31 9/15/36. Usage date.year, hash date time, and those same numbers, and it's going to output that 2011 because that's what it's going to look for that year, is that 4-digit integer. So based on this format of date, it went ahead and found that year for us, and it output that year. So we can utilize that to go ahead and spit out a year. So this is a very useful tool if you wanted to take advantage of or look up different functions and you wanted to see all of the different options that you have. Again, this is just our date functions, but if I got rid of this filter, and if you did apply a filter here and you wanted to get rid of it, then you could. You would just have to go into your applied steps, click that little X, that red X in the applied steps next to that step, and you'd go back to your full query. Now, let's go ahead and actually click on one of these and see what this function does. So again, I'm going to filter this down. And I'm just going to put in date one more time. We'll put in table, and we'll see, or not table, sorry. We'll put in, let's say, what do we have for text here? We'll say date to text. How about that? So I'm going to go ahead and uncheck all. I'm just like just date.toText. And you could do this if you really want to. If you wanted to return only one value, you can do that. Now I'm going to click on the actual text here just to show you guys kind of what happens when you do so. So now what it has done is turn this entire query into a parameter. So you can use this as a parameter function if you really wanted to. You could go ahead and input all those values and it would return whatever makes sense for that function, of course, based on the data that you have. But this, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this. This is an interesting way of actually practicing and exploring these different functions, and it will kind of guide you through how to take advantage of these. But using those M functions that you find in the shared table within the advanced query editor is a little bit easier to actually take advantage of these functions. So I would instead recommend trying something like that. So this is a pretty cool way of going ahead and actually just plugging in some different things here to see what comes out of it. But I did just want to show you guys how that works. Now, I clicked cancel here, and of course these are actually the same values that we just saw in that little window, so you could actually enter those here as well. And again, it says returns a textual representation of date, the date value date. This function takes in an optional format, parameter format. So this basically creates a parameter for us with this M function. That's referencing the last one, but it's saying, okay, go ahead and input a value here for me, and that will be our date, which is optional. All these are optional here, and then we can invoke that to return only that value. But let's go ahead and get rid of this parameter, and I'll show you guys how you can get right back to your shared table. You just, again, click that red X and go right back. This, again, really, we just suggest that you guys use this as a kind of a library to view all your different functions, see what they are and how they work. You can use your filters here to kind of search for the things that you might want to use or take advantage of, and then find exactly what works for you. Okay, so let's get back into our mQuery basics, and I want to go over kind of the entry level stuff to know when you're trying to write an mQuery. So I'm going to open up my slides here again one more time. All right, so the basics of mQuery, when we're talking about we're talking about syntax. It's good to understand the different syntax that you can actually understand, of course, how to read your mQuery. So of course, then it's easier to write it, right? It's at least easier to understand what's happening in that syntax and in that mQuery. So when we're talking about our mQuery and we're referencing a record, that would be just these brackets here. So x equals 1, or you could actually return multiple records here with x equals 1, y equals 2, etc. So this would just return a record, kind of like we just saw in that shared table. But then if you wanted to see a list, for instance, you would use your curly brackets here, and you would say 1, 2, 3, and that would return a list of 1, 2, and 3. You could also return a string, but keep in mind, you need to use your quotations for text if you want to return string. So because this is a number, it doesn't require it, but because this is text, it would. So we would just use our quotation A, comma, quotation B, etc. Or if we wanted to use a range, we could use 1.10. Now this will provide us with all the values from 1 to 10. We could do this in a number of different ways. We could do this with years as well. It's a very easy way of returning just a certain number of years. So this is how we could create a list very quickly and easily. Now for returning a table, things get a little different because we're going to use a function here. So we're going to use that table function. And then we're going to use parentheses, and then we have here just basically we're creating lists within that table. So column 1 and column 2, and then these are the values we want in those columns. So 1, 2, 2, 1, etc. As we can see here, we're seeing the table, the list of columns, and then the list of records. So these are the records within those columns, and these are the columns that we have here. Now, if we wanted to turn something into a function, then we would use, essentially, this is the most important part, creating this little arrow out of our equals greater than sign. This is saying, okay, I want to pass all of this in as a function. So we're saying whatever name we put here, which we need to put in parentheses, if we called this, say, our import function or get table or something like that, then we would just go ahead and put that in here. And we provide all of the scripts that we wanted to apply to that function there. This allows us to essentially turn this into a function or a parameter that we can then pass in values however we'd like, makes things very easy. Then we have duration. So if you wanted to, we could look at days, hours, minutes, and seconds with the duration function. We have date as well with year, month, and day, as it kind of makes sense, right? We're going from the highest to lowest, and then time with hour, minute, and second. So this is just important to understand exactly what the syntax of those is. So you see days, hours, minutes, and seconds is, of course, also from greatest to least. So keep that in mind when looking at these kinds of functions. You're going to usually be going from greatest, or the largest incremental to the smallest, right? Okay. So let's go ahead and actually input a couple of really basic values here into our mQuery and take a look at kind of how we can write this out ourselves. So let me get out of my slideshow here really quick, and I'm going to go ahead and we don't really need any values in here, but I'm just going to go ahead and essentially create a new blank query. So give me just 1 second, and we'll go ahead and do that here. Okay, so let's just go ahead and add a blank query. That's fine. We're going to click on new source here, and I'm going to click blank query. I'm just adding on to the same query because I'm not really concerned with messing this up or anything. Now, if we wanted to return records, remember that we're going to, of course, we're going to start everything with that equal sign. And then I want to use my bracket. So you'll see, like I said before, the formula bar does this as well, but M actually has IntelliSense now. So as we start typing things in, it's going to kind of autocomplete stuff for us. So as soon as I put my opening bracket, it's going to automatically add my closing bracket. This makes things a whole lot easier. So I can do x equals 1, and then I would return the record of just x1, right? Now, like I said before, I could, and you'll notice that this is in that kind of bluish greenish color because that is in a value, like an integer format. So if I wanted to add more than one record in there, I could go ahead and put a comma, and then I could put y equals 3 if I really wanted to. And I could hit enter, and you'll see x1, y3. I could add in a third one here as well. I could say z equals 2, whatever I want. So this is returning a basic record here, and we have our 3 different values here as well. So it's very simple. but it works quite well. It's pretty effective. Now notice that this is a record. So if we look at our query, we can see this is the icon for a record. It just has kind of the name of that column or that row, excuse me, and the value of that record, right? So we just see that record icon. So keep note of that and make sure that you understand there's a difference. Now, if we go ahead and create a new source, I'm going to go back to my home ribbon here. I'm going to click new source, blank query, and I'm going to try a list this time. So if I go in here and I say equals, and I'm going to use my curly brackets, and again, notice it's completing it for us there. Now we can go ahead and say 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, etc. And I can just hit enter, and it will return a list with all these values. Now again, take note of our icon here that this is a list, and this is a record, and this is a table or a query. So we can see that, well, a table query. So we can see that we have our different icons that are denoting what is what. Now notice this automatically says list 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14. Now if I wanted to say years equals 2010, 11, 12, etc., notice this kind of no longer works. So if I were to try to name it there, it's not really going to work for us, but that's okay, because again, this is just a list. Now, if instead I wanted to, rather than typing out every single value, if I just wanted to use a range, I could do so, again, using our dot here. So 2010, and I'm going to go to 2016 just for the fun of it. I'm going to hit enter, and now we have a list, 2010 to 2016. I could go way further if I wanted to and go to, say, 2050. And now I have a list from 2010 to 2050. If I really wanted to do that, then I see all the way down here, I have 2050. So that's a very easy way of kind of returning a list here if I wanted to. Now we can also go ahead and start using our functions to return certain values. So let's say I wanted to make this a little bit more dynamic. So rather than just returning 2010 to whatever year, and then we have records up to 2016 or 2019 or whatever, and then every year we'd have to go in and edit this query and fix it, right? But instead we can use a function to actually build this based on the current date and time of our machine. So if I just went ahead and used my date.year as a function here, and I know this exists because again we looked at it before, we used it before. Now if I wanted to reference, I'll just show you guys this first. If I wanted to reference my current time, again we could look at our shared query here. We could take a look at, don't worry about that, I just broke it because I clicked away. And I said, okay, well, I want to return my current year. So if I want to pull back, let's say, date, and we'll just look at these here. So we'll go down to like date time or something like that. So we see date time. See add zone date, fix local now. Okay, well, that might be useful. Let's look inside that. Okay, well, there's local now, date time dot local now. Now, I already know that this will return exactly what I want, but I'm just going to go ahead and use date here to return only date values. Then I'm going to go ahead and take a look at date, time, local, now. All right, so now let's click on this cell here. Returns a date time value set to the current date time on the system. So this is exactly how we can kind of look for the different functions that we might want to use. So I'm going to take advantage of this here, and I'm going to say, all right, 2010 dot dot, and then I'm going to use this set the date time dot local now, now, and then I'm going to just go ahead and use our closing parentheses there because this is going to automatically return a value. It doesn't require any other filters here. And we can go ahead and try to return this and see how that works out. It doesn't work. Now this is because of the fact that this is a number and this is date time. So we want to again use that function we used before to actually return the number value. So if I say date.year, and then within that date.year, I insert my date time local now, which I could have done this if I hadn't actually just gotten rid of my last one. I could have just referenced that in there, but I used IntelliSense to finish it off for me, and it broke it, and that's fine. So I have my date time local now, and I want to put in my opening and closing parentheses there, and we have date.year there as well. So now this should return our year from our current date and time, which again is based on the machine that this is on, 2019. So there we go. So now we see a list from 2010 to 2019. But what if, say, we want to return a list of years only including the current year if it's September or later? Because let's say our fiscal year starts then. Now, we could absolutely do that. It's not very difficult, so let's go ahead and try that. So rather than using date.year, and date.timeLocalNow on their own, we need to add in a different function here to take advantage of that. So I know that we have a function called dateAdd. So I'm going to use date.add, and you'll notice we have a couple of different ones here: dateAdd days, months, quarters, weeks, years, etc. So if I said dateAdd months, because again we want to go back to September, right? So I'm going to say dateAdd months, and again I got rid of my thing here, so I'm going to just go ahead and type it out. DateAdd months, and then I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up as it should be. There we go. So 2010 to date.year, date.add months, date.timeLocalNow. Now I need to go ahead and actually give that add months an integer here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that here. And we want to provide it with the number of months. So date time is any, number of months is number. And this is just telling us what that data type needs to be essentially. So I'm going to go ahead and say number, and I'm going to insert -8 for basically last September in that sense. All right, so there we go. So now we see that we have 2010, date.year, date.add months, date.time.localNow, and this is pulling back from the current year, because we're referencing the year here, right? And we're adding the months of -8. So we're saying I want to go back to September here. It's not yet September, so we know that we are within 2018. Still in that fiscal year. Our fiscal year spills over a whole lot, so we're still in 2018, and we're not into 2019 yet. So that's exactly where we could kind of draw that from. If we wanted to pull back a certain list of years or a certain list of numbers, or something like that, we could definitely take advantage of these functions. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys one more thing here, and we're going to actually use a function one more time. I'm just going to go ahead and rewrite this query rather than building a whole new one. And I'm going to show you guys how you can build a table from records. If you really wanted to do this, then you could absolutely do it. I'm going to say table.fromRecords. And I'm going to use my parentheses here, and then I'm going to provide it with a list of records. So you'll notice we have our parentheses, curly bracket, and normal bracket here, so it's a lot going on. But the list of records that I'm going to provide it with, we're going to go back to our kind of x equals 1 sample here. X equals 1, y equals 3, z equals 2, just like we had before. And now I'm also going to provide it with another set of records. I could go ahead and just hit enter here. And now we built a table, went straight into a table rather than building it into records and then converting that to table. We just went straight into a table from records. X equals 1, y equals 3, z equals 2, and now we have x1, y3, z2. Now if I wanted to return another row, I could just put a comma here and add in some more records. So I could say x equals 2, y equals 3, z equals 4, whatever we want. There we go, and just hit enter, and now we have another row. Now, it should be noted, if I wanted to go ahead and add another value here, and say like, okay, we'll call this w equals 5, it's not going to work. It's gonna struggle. It's gonna have a problem, and it's gonna freak out at us and say, hey, this doesn't work. I don't understand what you want from me. You're trying to bring back 4 row or 4 columns basically of records here, and we only have 3 columns here at the top. Now this won't really work the other way either. If I went ahead and got rid of this, I could wait for that to load, but we're running out of time, so I'm just going to go ahead and do this. If I try to do it here as well and try to return that instead, we get an error below that. So again, it just kind of breaks that entire list of records. Now, if I wanted to do something like that, I would probably have to enter in w equals null or something like that, and then we just return a null value if we didn't have a value for that row. So that shows you guys how you could easily build a table just from some records if you wanted to type in some values there. That's how you could do it. So, all right, guys, that is essentially our foundations of M. That is the very basics of M there. So just to show you guys kind of how that you shouldn't be scared of it. You can go in and play with it. You can get a lot out of it. And I would highly recommend you guys check out our course on our advanced Power BI. If you wanted more M, we definitely go into it a bit deeper. And we talk about our variables and parameters. If you're new to Power BI and you want a little bit more guidance, check out our Intro to Power BI course as well. And we go into some M formulas there as well. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, my name is Daniel Strative. Thanks so much for joining us. I didn't see any messages in the chat here, but if you guys had any questions, feel free to go ahead and spout them out. I know we don't really have any time, but feel free to contact me through the email or Twitter, just like I said before. Thanks so much, guys.
All right, thank you, Daniel. We really appreciate it. It doesn't look like, I think you have like one question in the chat, maybe two. Can you see them, or do you want me to read them off to you?
Just one second, hold on. I see it in the question here now. So I see one. Will this webinar be shared? Alan's, pardon me if I mispronounce your last name, Alan Sue here. Yes, this webinar will be shared. It will be on our website. We do share these webinars. We do one every Tuesday, and they will be on our website, pragmaticworks.com. If you want to view them, you would just go to training and free training, and you should see our webinars there. They will always be free. We have tons and tons of different stuff there. So you can absolutely take advantage of that. I can't really actually read all these. Let me expand this out a little more so I can actually see it. Sorry, guys. Pop it out. There we go. All right. Okay. Yes, so this presentation will be shared, like we said. You can absolutely reach that. It won't be emailed out. It will just be on our website, like I said, so you can definitely check that out. Renu asks, someone has to write this language, or is there any UI which we can use to perform the same tasks? You can absolutely use the Power Query Editor to go ahead and perform a lot of those tasks. Now, like I said, some of these steps can't be performed within the UI. You would have to write them in M. Alvin Johnson asked, is the IntelliSense for M in the latest version of Power BI optimized for Power BI Report Server? For the most part, M, there haven't really been a whole lot of new additions to M in the Power BI desktop. Now, Power BI Report Server, as I'm sure you're aware, Alvin, it's only updated about every 3 months, sometimes 4 if they get a little lazy. As far as I know, the IntelliSense is not currently there yet, but they should be adding it very soon. So hopefully you'll see that ASAP. They haven't really added anything to that IntelliSense since then, but hopefully that will be adjusted. Sandeep Pawar asked, can we add comments to the steps? Absolutely. Sorry, I didn't really show you guys that, but you should definitely add comments to the steps if you can. You just use your 2 forward slashes there to comment out lines. It's very similar to other languages. And you can absolutely add in whatever you'd like to provide a little bit of kind of instruction or context for anyone that might see it later on. Sorry if you guys were seeing a delay on the typing changes I was making. I saw that we probably had some connection issues there, but hopefully you guys were able to see things well. Jeffrey Miller asked, what is the purpose of the double forward slash? That is the comment out. So if you wanted to comment something out so that you could just put in some text so that people could understand what's going on there, but it wouldn't, basically when you put those 2 forward slashes and commenting something out, the engine in the background is going to essentially ignore that line. So it's not going to try and perform it as a step or a function or anything like that. Donald Parrish went ahead and shared the powerquerymicrosoft.com link. Yep, it absolutely shows you some good information there. Kevin Wolf asked, when you say convert to a table, is that a temporary table in Power BI or a table in memory or a physical memory in the database? So Kevin, when we're converting it to a table, we're essentially just converting it to a table after we have queried this information. So when you bring that table in, when you actually are performing that query, it's going to be applied there. It's not going to be applied at the physical memory in the database. Depending on kind of how you have it connected, it most likely will not. Usually, almost all cases, it will not. If you're using like a direct query or anything like that, then it's going to be different, perhaps, but usually any changes you're making in Power BI desktop are not going to be applied to the actual database or the data warehouse. But yes, it would just be converting that table, not temporary, actually permanently in the Power BI file. So everything that is applied is just applied there. if we can do data cleaning with Creator itself, why do we need to know M language? Sharon asks. So yes, absolutely. If you can do data cleaning with the Creator itself, do whatever you can with it. It makes things very, very easy. You don't need to know M, but it's absolutely something additional. So if you want to do any extra stuff, you could definitely take advantage of that and go ahead and do it. It's just to add that extra functionality from our kind of our shared table there. All right, guys, I hope, unfortunately, I can't answer all the questions. I know we're out of time, but hopefully you guys got some good information there, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely take advantage of this recording if you guys would like to view it again. If you want to see it, you can definitely check it out on our website. And like I said, we have courses on all this stuff, our Intro to Power BI course and our Advanced Power BI course. We also have data shaping in Power BI, which goes a lot into M and preparing your data for the model, which is very important as well. So definitely check that stuff out on our website. Thanks so much for checking out our video again.
All right, thank you, Daniel. Thank you so much for hosting. We really appreciate it. And like Daniel was saying, yes, this will be recorded. You guys will receive the recording in your emails tomorrow. And if you guys are ever looking, you can visit our website at pragmaticworks.com under resources. If you go to the free webinars tab, all of our webinars are in there. You can also register for upcoming webinars as well. But if you also visit our YouTube page, we have all the archive, any type of recording that we have done in the past. It's all on there, including the new ones too as well. But you guys will receive the link in your email tomorrow, so just look out for that. And then Thursday, we do have a bonus webinar. So if you guys want to register for that, that will be in the email that goes out for your link to this webinar. So if you want to register for that, also you can visit the page too and register for that one, or the ones that we have upcoming for next week. But thank you guys so much for attending. If you guys have any questions, please reach out to myself or Daniel. We'll be happy to help out. Thanks so much. You guys have a wonderful day.